Okay, so this is for my history final project. I'm gonna talk about the effects that the Atlantic slave trade had on modern society. So one of the largest effects was that of racism. Um, so because much of the world was Christian back then, they needed a excuse to actually have uh, black people as slaves, and so they would say that black people are inferior biologically, and so racism is one of the biggest issues in modern society. Now, I won't get political, but because of the Atlantic slave trade, um, racism was a problem back then, and racism is one of the biggest problems that we're facing, whether or not be the actual racism or just the feeling of racism. Especially after the George Floyd incident and all these other incidents coming up. Racism discussion is at an all-time high. Another problem that came from this was that it basically made it so that the government, so after slavery ended, racism, which forced black communities into poor, less developed neighborhoods, was in effect. The racism from the pre 1960s in businesses and schools forced black people into worse and poor neighborhoods. There was also the government also wanted to force blacks into poorer and more poorer communities. So that was one of the biggest effects of the Atlantic slave trade. Other several large effects have been the Civil War. That was pretty big. Martin Luther King Jr. He was famous. The Atlantic slave trade has affected the world in various negative ways. The Atlantic slave trade also affected Africa very poorly. Right now, Africa, some countries in Africa, not all countries, but some countries are very poor, run by warlords, and they're all just fighting each other. That's some countries. So that was also affected by the slave trade because you were getting the country to attack each other to get more resources, to attack each other more in a feedback loop. Also, so besides racism and being responsible, starting with why Africa is as poor as it is now, another thing that slavery also started was it sped up. I want to say humanitarianism sped up the Renaissance, and here's why. It's because everyone was obviously Christian back then, and so people now associate past crimes with Christianity, as people associate terrorism and other things with Islam. So, yeah, it sped up the downfall of Christianity. So, those are some of the biggest effects on the world, and kind of caused it caused racism. It caused racism. So that was certainly one effect, and we can still feel the effects of racism or the racism debate today. Yeah, that's about it. Well, that's all I can think of right now. But yeah.